My name is Rosa. I'm 32 years old and I've spent my entire adult life working toward one dream, owning my 1967 Shelby GT500. 5 years of weekends, late nights, and every spare dollar went into restoring that car. My parents always favored my sister Brooke, but what they did while I was away on business crossed a line I never imagined possible. I just returned home to find my garage empty, my car gone, and a betrayal that cuts deeper than I thought family was capable of. Before I tell you what happened when I confronted my family, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how karma comes full circle in this story. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago where most families lived comfortably, but nobody had much extra. My dad, Harold, worked in insurance sales, and my mom, Margaret, taught fourth grade at the local elementary school. We never went hungry, but there was always this careful attention to money that shaped my childhood. From an early age, I was drawn to computers and technology. While other kids in my middle school were hanging out at the mall, I was taking apart old desktop computers and learning how they worked. My parents didn't really understand my interest, but they didn't discourage it either. When I asked for a computer of my own, though, my dad just laughed and said, "What does a girl need with all that techie stuff anyway?" I ended up using the family computer during scheduled times, carefully documenting my projects in notebooks instead. Despite limited resources, I excelled academically. I studied, constantly joined every STEM club I could, and by senior year of high school, I had managed to secure a partial scholarship to Northwestern University for computer science. It wasn't a full ride, though, which meant I needed to work multiple jobs throughout college to make up the difference and cover my living expenses. The stark contrast between my situation and my younger sister Brooke's was impossible to ignore. When Brooke showed interest in fashion design during her high school years, my parents immediately converted our basement into a studio space for her. When Brooke decided she wanted to attend NYU 4 years later, my parents somehow found the money to fund her entire education, apartment included. No jobs, no loans, no scholarships required. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a tech startup in Chicago. The pay wasn't great, but it was a foot in the door. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, took public transportation everywhere, and put every spare dollar toward paying off my student loans. Over the next 7 years, I worked my way up through increasingly better positions until I reached my current role as a senior software engineer at Vertex Systems, one of the largest tech companies in the Midwest. My passion for cars started with my grandfather, Frank. He was a mechanic who owned a small garage, and some of my fondest childhood memories were the Saturday afternoons I spent with him surrounded by tools and engine parts. He taught me how to change oil, replace spark plugs, and eventually more complex repairs. My parents always frowned when I came home with grease under my fingernails, but those hours in the garage with my grandfather were sacred. When Grandpa Frank passed away when I was 16, I expected his prized possession, a 1965 Mustang, to come to me since I was the only one who had shown any interest in cars. Instead, the car went to my male cousin Travis, who had barely visited Grandpa in his final years. I got his toolbox, which I treasured, but the car going to Travis just because he was a boy stung deeply. I made a promise to myself then that someday I would own a classic car that would make my grandfather proud. But first I had to establish myself professionally and deal with the mountain of student debt I had accumulated. By the time I turned 27, I had finally paid off my student loans and had settled into a well-paying position at Vertex. I started researching classic cars, specifically Ford Mustangs and Shelbys, which had always been my grandfather's favorites. I set up alerts on auction sites and joined forums for classic car enthusiasts. Then one day, the notification came through. A 1967 Shelby GT500 was up for auction about 2 hours outside of Chicago. It was in rough shape, damaged in a garage fire with significant restoration needed, but it was the exact model I had dreamed of owning. The fire damage had scared away many potential buyers, making it potentially affordable if I stretched my savings to the absolute limit. The significance of this specific car model can't be overstated. The 1967 Shelby GT500 is automotive royalty. Only two 048 were ever produced. It was featured in films like Gone in 60 Seconds and has become a cultural icon representing American muscle car excellence. Finding one, even in damaged condition, was like discovering buried treasure. I drove out to see it immediately and knew within minutes that this was the one. I placed my bid and held my breath through a tense auction, ultimately securing it for nearly every dollar I had saved over the past 3 years. The auctioneer actually congratulated me personally, noting how rare it was to see a woman bidding on this type of vehicle. The restoration process was far more challenging than I anticipated. I had mechanical knowledge from my grandfather, but restoring a fire-damaged classic required specialized skills. I joined a local classic car club where I found mentors willing to guide me. I took evening classes in automotive restoration. I watched countless online tutorials and read every manual I could find. For 5 years, every weekend was devoted to the car. Evenings after work were spent researching parts or techniques. Vacation days were saved for intensive work periods. My dating life became non-existent. Friends stopped inviting me to events, knowing I'd decline in favor of working on the car project, as they called it. The financial investment was equally intense. Original Shelby parts, when I could find them, cost a fortune. Custom fabrication for the pieces I couldn't find cost even more. I took on freelance coding projects on top of my full-time job to fund the restoration, often working until 2 or 3 in the morning before grabbing a few hours of sleep and heading to my day job. During this process, the emotional connection I developed with the car deepened beyond what most people would understand. Every replaced part, every sanded surface, every carefully applied coat of paint represented hours of my life and thousands of dollars saved and spent. This wasn't just a vehicle. It was a physical manifestation of my determination and a tribute to my grandfather's influence. 3 months ago, I finally completed the restoration. The Highland Green, 1967 Shelby GT500 sat in my garage, gleaming every detail, correct every system functioning perfectly. What had started as a fire-damaged shell was now automotive perfection, worth well over $200,000 according to the insurance appraisal I had done. More importantly, it represented 5 years of my life and a connection to my grandfather that felt almost spiritual. Throughout these years of working on the car, my family dynamic remained complicated. My parents continued their pattern of favoring my sister Brooke, now 25, who had graduated from NYU but struggled to launch her fashion design career. While I had been entirely self-sufficient since college, Brooke still received regular financial support from our parents. The pattern of favoritism that began in childhood continued into our adult years. When I finally invited my family to see the completed Shelby, my father glanced at it briefly and commented, "Seems like a waste of money to me." My mother followed with, "Imagine if you'd invested all that in a house instead." Meanwhile, when Brooke created a new dress design, they would proudly show photos to everyone they knew. For my 30th birthday, I celebrated alone with a cupcake after working late. 2 months later, they threw Brooke a lavish 25th birthday party, flying in her friends from New York and renting out a restaurant. When I mentioned the disparity, my mother said, "Well, you're established now. Brooke still needs our support to succeed." Despite the ongoing disappointment, I maintained a relationship with my parents. Sunday dinners once a month, holiday gatherings, phone calls every couple of weeks. I loved them despite their flaws and held on to hope that someday they would recognize my accomplishments and treat me with the same enthusiasm they showed Brooke. I never imagined that this complicated but stable family dynamic was about to be shattered completely by an act of betrayal I could never have anticipated. The business trip that changed everything came up suddenly. I had been leading a software development team at Vertex on a major new security platform, and our CEO wanted us to present the technology to potential clients in Tokyo. As the technical lead, my presence was essential. "Rosa, this is huge for us," my boss Michael said during the emergency team meeting. "These Japanese investors could mean international expansion. The presentation is next week, and you're the only one who understands every aspect of the platform." The timing was terrible. I had just completed the car restoration and was still fine-tuning some minor details. Plus, I had never been away from the Shelby for more than a day since acquiring it. But this opportunity was too important to my career to decline. "How long will the trip be?" I asked, already mentally cataloging what I would need to prepare. 10 days, Michael replied. We fly out Monday, have 3 days of meetings, then there's a weekend technology conference they want us to attend, followed by 3 more days of follow-up meetings. This presentation came at a particularly competitive time in our company. Vertex had recently acquired a smaller security firm, bringing in new talent that created subtle but real competition among the senior engineers. Being chosen for this international presentation was both an honor and a necessary career move if I wanted to secure my position in the company's future. The trip was scheduled to begin in just 4 days, which left minimal time for preparation. Not only did I need to finalize the technical presentation and prepare for potential questions, but I also had to arrange for someone to watch my apartment and, most importantly, ensure my car would be safe. My first thought was to ask my close friend Diane to check on my place, but she had just left for a 2-week vacation in Europe. My neighbor Terrence was reliable, but he was allergic to my cat Luna. After considering my limited options, I reluctantly decided to ask my parents. They lived about 30 minutes away and had a spare key to my apartment from a time when I had been hospitalized briefly for appendicitis. I called them to explain the situation. "Mom, I have to go to Tokyo for a big presentation. Could you check on my apartment every couple of days? Just make sure Luna has food and water, get my mail, that sort of thing." "Of course, honey," my mother replied with unusual enthusiasm. "We're happy to help. How exciting for you to go to Japan. When do you leave?" I was surprised by her positive response, but relieved. "Monday morning. I'll drop off Luna's feeding schedule and everything you need to know." When I visited them on Sunday to give them the details, I made a point of explaining the importance of the car's security. "The Shelby stays in the garage," I explained firmly, showing them the sophisticated alarm system I had installed. "It has a tracking system and a specialized alarm. Please don't even go into the garage. It might trigger the alarm. If there's any emergency with the apartment, call me anytime, day or night." "Rosa, you're being overdramatic," my father said with a dismissive wave. "It's just a car. We're not going to touch your precious toy." "It's not a toy, Dad. It's worth over $200,000 now, and it's extremely important to me." $200,000? My mother's eyes widened. "For a car, that's ridiculous." "It's an investment," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "Classic cars of this caliber appreciate in value, especially ones with documented restorations. Plus, it's special to me because of Grandpa Frank." My father rolled his eyes, but they both promised to follow my instructions. I left them with the spare key, the alarm codes for the apartment, but not the garage, and detailed care instructions for Luna. Despite my father's dismissive attitude, I trusted that they would respect my clear boundaries. They had never given me reason to doubt their basic trustworthiness, despite their emotional favoritism of Brooke. The trip to Tokyo started brilliantly. Our presentation to the Japanese executives went even better than expected. I was able to answer all their technical questions, demonstrate the security features effectively, and build a rapport with the potential clients. "Rosa, you were fantastic in there," Michael said after the first day of meetings. "The way you explained the encryption protocols was perfect, just technical enough to show expertise without losing their interest." By the third day, we had moved from presentation mode to actual negotiation of terms. The Japanese company was clearly impressed and ready to move forward with implementation. Michael hinted that this success would likely mean a promotion for me when we returned to Chicago. "The executive team has been watching this deal closely," he told me over dinner. "There's talk of creating a new role, Director of International Security Solutions. I've put your name forward as the obvious choice." The irony of this incredible professional achievement happening at the exact time my personal life was imploding is something I still can't fully process. While I was earning accolades and setting up my future success, the foundation of what I valued most back home was being dismantled by the people who should have protected it. I tried calling home several times during the trip, both to check on Luna and to share my good news, but my calls to my parents went straight to voicemail. I assumed they were busy with their own lives and didn't think much of it. I did receive brief text responses confirming that Luna was fine, which eased my immediate concerns. It wasn't until the 8th day of the trip that I received a message that gave me pause. My neighbor Terrence, who lived across the hall, sent a text that read, "Hey, saw your parents at your place with some guy looking at your car. Everything okay?" My heart immediately started racing. I tried calling Terrence, but with the time difference, he didn't pick up. I sent a message back, "What guy?" "When was this?" His reply came several hours later. "Yesterday afternoon, older man in a suit. They were in the garage for about an hour." I tried to rationalize. Maybe they were showing the car to a friend. Maybe there was an issue with the building's garage they needed to address. But a sick feeling began to grow in my stomach. I tried calling my parents again, but still no answer. I attempted to check my apartment's security camera feed remotely, but for some reason the system was offline. This was especially concerning because I had set up redundant power sources specifically to prevent outages. Something was definitely wrong. The remaining 2 days of the trip were torture. I went through the motions of the meetings, forcing smiles and technical discussions, while my mind was consumed with worry about what was happening back home. I contemplated cutting my trip short, but we were in the final stages of the deal, and my absence would have jeopardized months of work. As my flight finally approached Chicago, I gazed out the window at the city lights below, trying to dismiss my concerns as paranoia. "Everything is fine," I told myself repeatedly. "There's a logical explanation. The car is fine. My parents wouldn't do anything to hurt me." The taxi pulled up to my apartment building, and I noticed immediately that something was different. The security guard, who usually nodded a greeting, was avoiding eye contact. As I approached the elevator with my luggage, he finally spoke. "Ms. Alvarez, about what happened with your car. I'm really sorry. I thought they had permission since they had the keys and everything." My blood ran cold. "What happened to my car?" I rushed down to the garage, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached my parking spot, I froze. The space was empty. My beautiful Highland Green 1967 Shelby GT500 was gone. For several minutes, I simply stood there, unable to process what I was seeing. The vacant parking spot seemed to mock me, a gaping hole where 5 years of my life should have been. I circled the space as if the car might materialize if I just looked at the emptiness from a different angle. In a daze, I returned to the lobby and approached the security guard. "Who took my car, when, how?" The questions tumbled out in a frantic stream. The guard looked deeply uncomfortable. "Your parents came with an older gentleman 3 days ago. They had keys to the car and disarmed the garage security to move it. I assumed they had your permission." "They absolutely did not have my permission," I said, my voice rising. "Did they say anything? Where were they taking it?" "They didn't say much to me, ma'am, just that they needed to move the vehicle temporarily. The man with them seemed very interested in the car, kept walking around it and looking underneath." My first thought was theft. Someone had stolen my car, and somehow my parents were involved. I immediately called the police and reported the vehicle stolen. An officer arrived within the hour and took my statement in my apartment. "So your parents had access to your apartment and garage," the officer clarified. "They had a key to my apartment for emergencies only," I explained. "They weren't supposed to enter the garage at all. I was explicit about that." The officer looked sympathetic but doubtful. "And they had the keys to the vehicle?" "No, they shouldn't have. The car keys were in my desk drawer in the bedroom." The officer made some notes. "We'll need to review any security footage. Does your building have cameras in the garage?" Thankfully, my building had an extensive security system. We went to the management office where they pulled up the footage from 3 days prior. What I saw on that screen broke something inside me. The timestamp showed 2:17 p.m. My father entered the security code to the garage door. I had never given him that code. My mother followed behind him along with an older man in a gray suit I didn't recognize. They approached my car with purpose, not hesitation. My father produced the keys, unlocked the vehicle, and the unknown man spent several minutes inspecting it, opening the hood, checking the engine, and even getting underneath to look at the chassis. There was some discussion I couldn't hear. Then the man handed my father what appeared to be a check. My father pocketed it, shook the man's hand, and then helped guide the Shelby out of its parking spot. The stranger got behind the wheel of my car, and drove away. My parents watched it leave, then exited the garage looking pleased with themselves. That's "That's my car," I whispered, watching my dream drive away in the hands of a stranger. "They sold my car without my permission." The officer watched the footage twice more, then turned to me with regret in his eyes. "Ms. Alvarez, I understand you're upset, but this is going to be complicated. They had access to your apartment, knew the garage code, and had the car keys. It's going to be difficult to classify this as theft in the traditional sense." "But they stole it," I protested. "They had no right to sell my property." "I agree it's wrong," he said carefully. "But legally, this looks more like a family dispute than a traditional auto theft. The man who bought it likely believes he made a legitimate purchase. You'll probably need to pursue this through civil court rather than criminal." I felt helpless and betrayed. The officer took down all the details of the car, including its VIN number and distinctive features, and promised to file a report. But he made it clear that recovery would be challenging given the circumstances. After the officer left, I sat in my empty apartment trying to process what had happened. Luna jumped onto my lap, purring and oblivious to my distress. I absently stroked her fur while my mind raced through possible explanations. Why would my parents do this? How could they violate my trust so completely? And what was I going to tell Michael about the business partnership aspect of the car? The truth was, the Shelby wasn't entirely mine. 6 months ago, when I needed specialized parts that exceeded my budget, Michael had offered to invest in the restoration as a business opportunity. We had formalized the arrangement with proper paperwork. He owned 30% of the vehicle as an investment, with first right of refusal if I ever decided to sell. We both understood the appreciating value of properly restored classic cars, and he had been excited to be part of the project. This meant my parents hadn't just betrayed me, they had sold property that wasn't fully mine to sell. They had potentially created serious legal problems for all of us. I spent the next hour gathering evidence photos of the car restoration documentation investment agreement with Michael insurance papers and the security footage. Then I drove to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel of my rental car. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed several new items around their house. New patio furniture that hadn't been there before my trip. What looked like a new television visible through the window. My mother's old sedan had been replaced by a newer model. My stomach lurched as the pieces started to fit together. They had used the money from my car to upgrade their lifestyle. My 5 years of sacrifice had funded their shopping spree. I sat in the car for several minutes trying to calm my breathing and organize my thoughts. I needed answers, but I also needed to maintain enough composure to get to the truth. Finally, I grabbed my folder of evidence and approached the front door. I rang the doorbell, and my mother answered with a surprised expression that quickly shifted to something like guilt before she masked it with a smile. "Rosa, you're back from Japan. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Where is my car?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. My mother's smile faltered only slightly as she stepped aside to let me enter. "Oh, you're home earlier than we thought. Come in, come in. Your father is watching TV in the living room." The casual greeting, as if nothing was wrong, made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure as I stepped into the house I grew up in. Everything looked different somehow. The familiar surroundings now felt alien in light of what they had done. My father glanced up from his recliner, and I saw a flash of panic cross his face before he too adopted a casual demeanor. "Hey, kiddo, how was Japan? Make any big deals for your company?" I remained standing, my evidence folder clutched tightly in my hand. I asked where my car is. My mother busied herself straightening magazines on the coffee table. "What car, honey, your rental?" "It's in the driveway, isn't it?" "Don't," I said, my voice low. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. My Shelby. The car I spent 5 years restoring. The car that was in my garage until 3 days ago when you two took it and sold it to a stranger." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair but maintained eye contact. "I think you're confused, Rosa. Maybe the jet lag is getting to you. Why don't you sit down and your mother can make you some tea?" "I'm not confused," I replied, pulling out my phone. "I have the security footage from my building. I can see you entering my garage with a man I don't know. I can see you giving him my car keys. I can see him handing you a check, and I can see my car being driven away by a stranger." I pressed play on the video and held the phone toward them. My mother's face paled as she watched. My father finally looked away, unable to maintain the lie in the face of such clear evidence. After a long silence, my father cleared his throat. "We were going to tell you, Rosa. We just thought it would be better to wait until you got back from your trip." "Tell me what?" I demanded. "Tell me that you stole my property and sold it without my permission, that you violated my trust and my explicit instructions not to even enter my garage." My mother's demeanor suddenly shifted from feigned confusion to defensive anger. "You're being selfish, Rosa. You've always been selfish. Do you have any idea what your sister is going through right now? Her design business is struggling and she needed an opportunity to network with the right people." I stared at her in disbelief. "What does Brooke have to do with you selling my car?" My father finally stood up, his expression hardening. "Fine. Yes, we sold the car. That old thing was just sitting in your garage anyway." "You never even drove it." "Because I had just finished restoring it," I nearly shouted. "I was planning the first real drive for when I got back from Tokyo." "Well, it's done now," my father said flatly. "We got $85,000 for it, which seemed like a good deal for an old Ford." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. 85,000. That car is worth over $200,000. You sold it for less than half its value. My parents exchanged a quick glance and I realized they had no idea of the car's true worth. They had sold a $200,000 investment for $85,000 without even bothering to research its value. "Where's the money?" I demanded. "I want it back. All of it. Now." My mother's face twisted into an expression I'd never seen before, a mix of smug satisfaction and disdain. "The money is gone, Rosa. Spent. Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life." I couldn't help it. I let out a choked laugh at the absurdity of the situation. My mother's eyes narrowed. "What's so funny?" she snapped. "Two things," I said, regaining my composure. "First, I'm your daughter too, though you seem to have forgotten that. And second, the car you sold wasn't fully mine to sell." Their expressions shifted from defensive to confused. I opened my folder and removed the partnership agreement, placing it on the coffee table. 6 months ago, I entered into a business partnership with my boss, Michael. He invested in the final stages of the restoration in exchange for 30% ownership of the vehicle. We have a legal contract. The car belongs to both of us, and neither of us authorized its sale. The color drained from my father's face as he picked up the document and began to read. "What this means," I continued, my voice steady, "is that you didn't just betray me. You didn't just steal from me. You committed actual fraud. You sold property that wasn't yours to sell without the owner's permission and pocketed the money. That's a crime with serious legal consequences." My mother sank onto the couch, the smugness gone from her expression. "You're lying. You're just saying this to scare us." "Michael will be landing in Chicago tomorrow," I said. "I've already spoken to him on the phone. He's planning to file charges unless we can recover the car immediately." At that moment, the front door opened, and my sister Brooke breezed in, shopping bags in hand. She stopped short when she saw me. "Rosa, I didn't know you were back." Her voice was cheerful, but her eyes darted nervously between our parents and me. She was wearing new designer clothes and shoes I recognized as being well beyond her usual budget. "Brooke," I acknowledged coldly, "I hear you're having the time of your life thanks to my car." Brooke at least had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but it didn't last long. "Mom and Dad said you wouldn't mind. They said you have plenty of money and that old car was just a hobby." "Just a hobby?" I repeated incredulously. "That hobby was worth $200,000 and represented 5 years of my life." "Well, it's done now," Brooke said with a shrug that reminded me exactly of our father. "I've already booked the trip to Paris and Milan with my friends. All non-refundable deposits. The car money is helping me meet the right fashion industry people to finally launch my career." And I stared at my sister, trying to see any sign of remorse or understanding of the magnitude of what they had done. There was none. In her mind, as in my parents', my sacrifice was expected. My car, my 5 years of work, my dream, all disposable if it meant supporting Brooke's ambitions. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, looking at each of them in turn. It's not that you took something I valued. It's not even that you did it behind my back. It's that you genuinely believe you were entitled to do it. That my feelings, my work, my property don't matter if Brooke needs something. Oh, don't be so dramatic, my mother sighed. It's just a car. Family helps family. You'll get over it. That was the moment something snapped inside me. Years of built-up resentment of being the responsible one who never complained of accepting less so Brooke could have more all came rushing to the surface. I am family, I shouted. I have always been family. I put myself through college while you paid for Brooke's education. I worked 3 jobs while Brooke got an allowance. I have supported myself entirely since I was 18, while Brooke still gets her rent paid at 25. And the one thing I did for myself you stole and gave to her. My voice had risen to a level I'd never reached before. On a side table, a framed family portrait from years ago suddenly tipped over and crashed to the floor, the glass shattering a physical manifestation of what was happening to our family. No one moved to pick up the broken frame. You've never understood me, I said, my voice lower but intense. You've never valued what was important to me. But this time you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. You've stolen from me, and you've stolen from my business partner. And there will be consequences. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. I'm going to get my car back. And then we're going to have a very different kind of relationship going forward, if we have one at all. I left them standing in stunned silence, the broken family portrait on the floor between them. The next morning, I met Michael at his office to discuss our options. I had barely slept, oscillating between rage, disbelief, and a profound sadness that my family could betray me so completely. Michael's reaction surprised me. Rather than the anger I expected, he showed genuine concern for my emotional state first. Rosa, I'm so sorry this happened to you, he said, his usual businesslike demeanor softened. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind. How are you holding up? I appreciated his empathy, but was too focused on recovering the Shelby to dwell on my feelings. I'll process the emotional stuff later. Right now I need to get our car back. Michael nodded, shifting into problem-solving mode. I've already contacted our company attorney, Diane Winters. She specializes in business law, not car theft, but she can give us preliminary advice until we find a specialist. Diane arrived shortly thereafter, a sharp woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense attitude that I immediately appreciated. She reviewed the partnership agreement, the police report, and the security footage I had collected. This is actually fairly straightforward from a legal perspective, she said after reviewing everything. Your parents had no legal right to sell the vehicle. They committed fraud against both the buyer and you as the owners. The sale is invalid. So we can just take the car back? I asked hopefully. Diane shook her head. Not quite that simple. The buyer is likely an innocent party in this. He believed he was making a legitimate purchase. We need to locate him and the vehicle, then navigate the recovery carefully to avoid creating more legal issues. We decided on a 2-pronged approach. First, file a comprehensive police report for grand theft auto and fraud. Second, hire a private investigator to track down the buyer and the car more quickly than the police might be able to. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation grew increasingly complicated. My parents began calling and texting incessantly, alternating between angry defensiveness, "You're tearing this family apart over a car," and tearful pleas, "We didn't understand what we were doing. Please drop this." I maintained minimal contact, only responding with requests for information about the buyer, which they claimed not to have. Their refusal to help recover the car only deepened the rift between us. The private investigator, a former police detective named James Martinez, managed to track down the buyer through the check my parents had deposited. The Shelby was now in Indiana with a collector named Walter Prescott, who had already begun modifying it to his own tastes. That's going to complicate things, Diane warned when we learned about the modifications. He's investing his own money into a car he believes he legitimately purchased. Every dollar he puts in makes the eventual resolution more difficult. We arranged an emergency hearing with a judge to get a court order preventing further modifications to the vehicle while the ownership dispute was resolved. The judge granted our request based on the partnership agreement and the security footage evidence. When Mr. Prescott was served with the court documents, his reaction was predictably furious. He hired his own attorney and counterclaimed that he was a good faith purchaser who shouldn't be punished for my parents' actions. He has a point, Diane admitted during one of our strategy sessions. In cases like this, courts sometimes rule that an innocent buyer who reasonably believed they were making a legitimate purchase has rights too. We may end up having to buy the car back from him at the price he paid. That's $85,000 we shouldn't have to pay, I protested. True, but then you would have legal standing to sue your parents for the $85,000 plus any damages to the vehicle and legal costs, she explained. The question is whether your parents have assets to cover such a judgment. Meanwhile, the work situation was becoming strained. Although Michael remained supportive, the promotion that had been all but guaranteed after our successful Japan trip was now on hold. The executive team is concerned about your focus right now, Michael told me gently during my performance review. They understand the situation, but they need to know your personal issues won't affect your work performance in a director-level position. I threw myself into work with renewed determination, trying to prove that I could compartmentalize my personal chaos. But the truth was the betrayal and ongoing legal battle were taking a toll. I found myself making small errors that I would never have made before, missing details in code reviews and struggling to concentrate during meetings. The most unexpected development came when several of my colleagues rallied around me. James from the QA team offered to review all my code before submissions. Sophia from project management helped cover for me during meetings when my attention drifted. Even our normally reserved CTO David called me into his office one day. When I was 30, my brother emptied my bank account to cover gambling debts. He told me, surprising me with this personal revelation. Family betrayal is uniquely painful. Take the time you need, Rosa. Your position here is secure. Their support was a lifeline during what had become the most difficult period of my life. It also highlighted the stark contrasts between how my work family treated me versus my blood relations. The extended family fallout was another layer of pain. My Aunt Carmen, my mother's sister, called to berate me for creating drama and breaking your mother's heart. My cousin Travis, the one who got my grandfather's Mustang, took to social media to vaguely post about materialistic people who value cars over family. But there were unexpected allies, too. My Uncle Robert, my father's brother, reached out privately. Your grandfather Frank would be furious about what they did, he told me over coffee one afternoon. He always said you were the only one who really understood cars like he did. I should have spoken up when they gave the Mustang to Travis. I'm not making that mistake again. He revealed that my parents had done similar things to other family members over the years, small betrayals of trust typically to benefit Brooke in some way. I wasn't the first victim, just the one with the highest financial stakes. Through all of this, my mother continued her campaign of emotional manipulation. I raised you better than this, she said in one particularly hurtful voicemail. A good daughter would forgive her family. A good daughter wouldn't choose a car over her parents' love. Each message twisted the knife deeper, not because her tactics were working, but because they revealed how fundamentally she misunderstood or disregarded what she had done. In her mind, I was still the villain for holding them accountable. My father finally called after weeks of letting my mother do the emotional labor. His approach was different, blunter, less manipulative, but equally dismissive of my feelings. This has gone far enough, Rosa, he said, his voice gruff. Your mother cries every night. Brooke had to cancel her trip. You've made your point. Now drop the legal nonsense so we can be a family again. Did you sell the car knowing it wasn't fully mine to sell? I asked directly. After a long pause, he admitted, we didn't know about your boss being part owner, but yes, we knew you wouldn't have approved. We thought we were making a parental decision for your own good. You were too attached to that car. Then we don't have anything more to discuss until the legal issues are resolved, I replied, ending the call. 3 months into the ordeal, we finally had our day in court. My parents were required to appear, as was Mr. Prescott, the buyer. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the partnership agreement, the security footage, and testimony from all parties. My mother maintained until the end that they were acting in my best interest, that the car was an unhealthy obsession, and that supporting Brooke's career opportunity was what families do for each other. The judge was unimpressed. Mrs. Alvarez, the court is not concerned with your family dynamics or your opinions about your daughter's hobbies. The only relevant fact is that you sold property that did not belong to you without permission from the legal owners. That constitutes fraud. The judgment, when it came, was decisive. The sale was invalidated, and Mr. Prescott was ordered to return the vehicle. However, recognizing his position as an innocent party, the judge ordered that he be reimbursed for his purchase price plus the documented cost of any reversible modifications he had made to the car. The financial burden of this reimbursement was placed entirely on my parents, not on Michael and me as the rightful owners. Additionally, they were ordered to pay our legal fees. The color drained from my father's face as the financial impact became clear. They would need to come up with over $100,000 to comply with the judgment. Your Honor, my father began, we don't have that kind of money. We've already spent most of what we got for the car. The judge was unmoved. Then I suggest you take out a home equity loan, Mr. Alvarez. The court can arrange a payment plan, but the full amount will be paid. You created this situation through your actions, and you will bear the consequences. As we left the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of my sister Brooke, who had attended the hearing but hadn't been called to testify. For the first time, she looked genuinely shaken. The reality that actions have consequences seemed to be dawning on her in a way it never had before. The legal victory was only the beginning of the resolution process. Actually, recovering the Shelby proved to be both emotionally and logistically challenging. When Michael and I went to Indiana to reclaim the car, the scene was tense. Mr. Prescott, though legally obligated to return the vehicle, made his resentment clear. I bought this car in good faith, he said as he handed over the keys. Your family issues shouldn't have become my problem. I understood his frustration. He was an innocent party caught in my family's dysfunction. I'm sorry you were dragged into this, I told him sincerely. If it helps at all, I spent 5 years restoring this car by hand. It means everything to me. Something in my earnestness must have reached him because his expression softened slightly. You did all the restoration work yourself. I wondered why the documentation was so meticulous. Every bolt, every wire, I confirmed. My grandfather taught me. He nodded, a new respect in his eyes. I've made some changes you'll want to reverse. Nothing structural, but I changed the exhaust system and started reupholstering the interior. The drive back to Chicago was bittersweet. Having the Shelby back should have been purely joyful, but seeing the changes Prescott had made, what he called nothing structural, felt like violations. The custom exhaust system he'd installed altered the car's iconic rumble. The partially reupholstered interior now had an incongruous mix of original and new materials. These changes, though reversible, were reminders of how close I had come to losing the car completely. Meanwhile, my parents were facing the harsh financial consequences of their actions. To comply with the court order, they had indeed taken out a home equity loan. The monthly payments would strain their retirement budget for years to come. My mother called this financial abuse on my part, still unable to connect their current hardship to their own choices. What surprised me most was my father's evolution. After the initial shock of the judgment wore off, he called me one evening. Unlike my mother's emotional manipulations, his approach was direct. I was wrong, he said simply. Not just about taking the car, but about a lot of things. I've never understood your interests or your drive. I think I resented that you didn't need us the way Brooke does. And it wasn't a complete revelation. He still framed Brooke's dependency as something positive, but it was the first acknowledgement I'd ever received that his treatment of me had been unfair. I appreciate you saying that, Dad, I replied, not quite ready to forgive, but recognizing the effort it took for him to admit fault. Your mother may never see it, he continued. She's always needed to be needed. Brooke gives her that. You never did. It's not right how we treated you, but I don't know if she can change at this point. And you? I asked. Can you change? There was a long pause. I want to try, he finally said. I'd like to understand what you see in that car for starters. Maybe you could show me sometime. It was a small olive branch, but a meaningful one. Brooke's reaction to the fallout was more complicated. Her European trip canceled, her easy source of funding cut off. She was forced to confront reality in ways she never had before. She alternated between blaming me for overreacting and expressing genuine remorse for her role in the situation. During a tense coffee meeting about a month after the court case, she made a surprising admission. I never thought about where the money came from, she said, staring into her latte. Mom and Dad always provided whatever I needed. When they said they could fund the trip to meet these fashion industry contacts, I just assumed they had savings or something. You knew it was my car they sold, I pointed out. Yeah, but she struggled visibly with the concept. I didn't think about what that meant to you. It was just a car to me. It was 5 years of my life, Brooke. It was my connection to Grandpa Frank. It was a $200,000 investment. She winced at each statement. I get that now. I'm trying to anyway. She hesitated, then added, I got a job last week, at Nordstrom. Just retail, but it's something. And it wasn't an apology, but it was a step toward reality, one she'd avoided her entire adult life. At work, the professional fallout gradually subsided. The promotion that had been put on hold was revisited 3 months after the court case concluded. Michael advocated strongly on my behalf, emphasizing how I had maintained my professional responsibilities throughout personal turmoil. The way you handled the Japan deal while dealing with this family crisis shows exactly the kind of resilience we need in leadership, he told me as he formally offered the Director of International Security Solutions position. With the new role came increased responsibility, but also increased compensation enough to properly complete the second restoration of the Shelby, reversing Prescott's modifications and addressing some minor damage that had occurred during his brief ownership. The restoration process took another 6 months of evenings and weekends. This time, though, I approached it differently. Instead of working in isolation, I invited colleagues to help with specific tasks. I gave my father a careful tour of the engine, explaining each component and its significance. I even allowed Brooke to help with some of the interior work, using it as an opportunity to explain the car's historical significance. These shared experiences didn't erase the betrayal, but they created new context around the car, a symbol not just of my passion and hard work, but now also of boundaries established, and in some cases relationships cautiously rebuilt on new terms. 1 year after the theft, I finally took the Shelby for the drive I had originally planned before the Tokyo trip, a weekend journey to Michigan's Upper Peninsula where my grandfather had grown up. The car performed perfectly, every restored system working in harmony. Driving along Lake Michigan with the windows down, engine rumbling beneath me, I felt a sense of closure beginning to form. It's been exactly 1 year since I recovered my Shelby, and exactly 2 years since I first completed its restoration. In that time, nearly everything in my life has changed, some for better, some still in progress. I've moved from my apartment to a small house in Oak Park with a temperature-controlled 2-car garage. The security system is state-of-the-art with redundant power supplies and multiple camera angles. The Shelby has its own dedicated space protected by both technology and the hard lessons I've learned about trust. My relationship with my parents has been completely redefined. Gone are the obligatory Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings based on family expectation rather than genuine connection. Instead, I interact with them on my terms with clear boundaries and limited emotional investment. My father has made genuine efforts to understand me better. He asked me to teach him basic maintenance on his own car, creating opportunities for us to work side by side. During these sessions, he shared more about his own father, a stern, withholding man whose approval he never earned, and I've begun to understand how generational patterns shaped our family dynamic. My mother has been less willing to evolve. She still views herself as the victim in the situation, though she's careful not to say this directly to me. Through family friends, I've heard she describes the court judgment as my way of getting revenge, rather than a natural consequence of her actions. We maintain a polite but distant relationship, speaking briefly on birthdays and major holidays, but little more. Brooke has undergone the most surprising transformation. Losing her European trip and suddenly facing financial reality triggered what she now calls her overdue adulthood. She kept the retail job at Nordstrom and was recently promoted to department manager. She's paying her own rent for the first time at age 26, and though she struggles with budgeting, she hasn't asked our parents for money in 6 months. Last month, she asked if she could come see the restored Shelby. As she ran her hand along the perfectly finished fender, she said something I never expected to hear. "I get it now," she said quietly. "Why this matters so much to you. It's not just a car, it's proof that you can create something lasting through your own effort. I've never built anything that would last." That moment represented a shift in our sisterly relationship, a new respect that might eventually grow into true closeness if we both continue the work. My professional life has flourished in ways I couldn't have predicted. The director role came with new challenges and opportunities, including quarterly international travel. I've built a reputation for uncompromising standards and ethical leadership qualities that were forged in the crucible of the family crisis. Michael and I modified our partnership agreement for the Shelby. He offered to sell me his 30% stake, but I counter-proposed that we maintain the partnership and use it as a platform for mentoring young women interested in automotive restoration. We now host monthly workshops in my garage where teenage girls learn basic mechanics using the Shelby as their classroom. The healing process hasn't been linear. I've worked with a therapist specializing in family trauma to address the deep wounds inflicted not just by the theft of the car, but by the lifetime of conditional love and favoritism that preceded it. "What you experienced was a fundamental violation of trust," Dr. Levine explained during one session. "The car was the tangible item taken, but what they really stole was your sense of security in your family relationships." Through therapy, I've learned to recognize manipulation tactics that I previously normalized. The guilt trips, the comparisons to Brooke, the expectation that I should sacrifice while others receive, they all stemmed from an unhealthy family system I didn't create but had the power to stop participating in. Building a chosen family of trusted friends has been essential to my healing. Diane, who started as just a friendly neighbor, has become like the supportive older sister I never had. My colleague Sophia organized a weekend trip to a vintage car show where I could share my passion with people who understood its value. These connections, based on mutual respect rather than obligation, have shown me what healthy relationships actually feel like. Trust remains my biggest challenge. When my new boyfriend Jason borrowed my everyday car, not the Shelby, to pick up groceries, I found myself checking its location on a tracking app repeatedly until he returned. I'm working on this hypervigilance, recognizing that not everyone will betray my trust the way my family did. The most significant change has been internal. I no longer seek approval from people who aren't capable of giving it. I've stopped trying to earn my mother's recognition through achievement. I've released the hope that if I just accomplish enough, my family will finally see and value me on my own terms. The Shelby, once primarily a connection to my grandfather and a testament to my technical skills, now represents something even more profound: my willingness to fight for what matters to me, to establish boundaries, and to demand respect. Every time I drive it, I'm reminded not just of the restoration work, but of my own restoration as a person who knows her worth isn't determined by family validation. Family relationships are complex, and perfect resolution isn't always possible. My parents will likely never fully understand the depth of their betrayal or fully acknowledge the unfairness of how they've treated me compared to Brooke. But I've found peace in accepting this limitation while still protecting myself from further harm. The truth I've come to embrace is that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. I can release the active anger toward my family without removing the boundaries that keep me safe. I can acknowledge the limited capacity they have for change without making myself vulnerable to repeated hurt. I can love them from a distance that protects my well-being. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: stand firm in what matters to you, even when the people who should support you the most try to dismiss it. Your passions, your work, your boundaries. These aren't negotiable just because someone shares your DNA. True family, whether blood or chosen, builds you up rather than diminishes you. I'd love to know if any of you have experienced something similar with family members who couldn't respect your boundaries or your passions. Have you ever had to establish firm limits with loved ones to protect yourself? Leave a comment below and let me know how you handled it. And if you found my story meaningful, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even against family. Thank you for listening to my journey of betrayal and redemption, and I hope it helps you navigate your own challenging relationships with strength and self-respect.